Welcome to Theory of Pets. I'm a passionate pet owner with a drive to help others like me uncover the truth about the pet industry and what goes on behind the scenes. Training a dog is quite possibly the most frustrating aspect of caring for your canine over the course of his life. It can be so aggravating to try, use different products, use different methods, try to figure out what works for you and your pet. So today I wanted to have someone speak with us about the differences between dog behavior and dog training and different ways that we can interact with our dogs to help to understand, for us to understand them and for them to understand us as well, to make dog training as easy as possible. It's never going to be an easy task. With some dogs, it's certainly easier than others, but it's something that's always going to take patience and consistency. And today, Jessica O'Neill has agreed to talk to us. Jessica is the owner and the inventor of the Jaywalker dog harness, and she's actually been in the pet industry for about 10 years now. She really has extensive knowledge in learning theory and practices. She really likes to work with pet owners to help them understand their dogs more than, just having high expectations. She really likes to work with pet owners to help them understand the dog, to help the dog understand the owner, and to make the best of that bond and to foster that bond while you're training your dog. So she's going to tell us a lot about training, but she's also going to talk about some of the products that she's used. Jessica, like most of us, has been to the store and seen the hundreds of dog training products and has dealt with the frustration of trying to choose the best one for your pet. She couldn't find what she was looking for, so she actually just invented the product that she wanted, and now she's been using it obviously in her dog training work, and she's going to tell us a little bit more about the product itself, how she uses it, why she uses it, and of course give us some great tips on training a dog and understanding a dog's behavior. One of my favorite quotes, it's right on the top of her website. Jessica says, "It's not how your dog behaves that determines if you're a good dog owner, but how you respond to your dog's behavior that counts." And I think that's so amazing. What a great impacting quote that we can really think about, and every pet owner can relate to that. So I am going to let you guys listen to everything that Jessica says, and then if you guys have any questions, of course, get on our website, theoryofpets.com. I'll try to answer any questions. I can pass along any questions that you might have for Jessica as well. And of course, on our website, if you're watching this on YouTube or checking it out on social media, just below this video, there are links to the dog walker harness. It's the jaywalkerdogharness.com, and then petintel.com, which is a canine coaching and behavior specialist website that Jessica has. So you can check those out. They're great resources. So how did you get started in this industry? Is it something that you've always wanted to do? Did something happen that make you, get into it?
That's an excellent question, because I grew up with dogs. So I grew up with a bunch of animals around me at all times. I mean, I went through, as a child, everything from breeding rats to having aquatics, and of course surrounded by a pack of dogs at all times. So I always had a love of animals. I also worked a lot with horses and farm animals because our family moved to the country, and we sort of had a hobby farm. And being city slickers, we had to learn pretty quickly how to care for these animals. So that was quite an experience. So I always knew I had a love of animals, but I also had that sort of compassionate care drive. So I knew I wanted to work in an industry where I was helping people, and that's the direction I actually went initially, was to work with individuals, with humans, doing brain injury rehab. I worked with children with behavior issues, adults with developmental issues, and even working with seniors who needed assistance and even in dementia and those kinds of things.
Wow.
So I had a pretty big, a vast background in the human realm and all different levels of human care that are required. And it was a pretty natural segue for me to start doing those kinds of things, but with animals. And I knew I didn't want to make animals mechanical. I knew I wanted to work with animals, specifically with dogs, but animals in general. I knew I wanted to work with them to help them to achieve their best selves, essentially.
Oh, wonderful. That's great. So that kind of leads into the bulk of what we'll be talking about today, which is the difference between behavior work and dog training. And I know when you and I spoke last week, I had mentioned to you that that's often what I hear from people, is those two terms kind of being used interchangeably. That oh yeah, we're working on behavior, we're training. Are you working on behavior or are you training? Because they are two different things, and it sounds like you figured that out pretty early on, and so you wanted to really kind of focus on that.
Yeah, I mean, not that there's anything wrong with doing obedience training, and there's a lot of really cool things you can do in the different realms of training. I personally decided to specialize in the behavior aspect, and how I make that distinction in our business, how we divide the two, and we explained it to people. Essentially, when you're working with training, you're really working with the physical. When I say this or when this happens, you do this thing, and then there's a consequence, so either a good or bad consequence. So what we like to work on is the emotional side, and you can't really train away an emotion. Certainly, people use training with behavior issues on a regular basis, and sometimes it's effective. Sometimes you can train an incompatible behavior. Sometimes it's a good distraction for the animal. Sometimes it suppresses the emotion, and sometimes it actually makes it worse. So the way that we categorize behavior work versus training work is the difference between emotional and physical. Now, the physical and emotional tend to be attached, but you could have a really obedient dog who also has emotional baggage and has behavior issues. And as a matter of fact, 9 out of 10 of the clients that I work with have really well trained dogs. So they are super smart. It's not uncommon for me to hear from clients that they were the star of their obedience class. So the behavior and training is divided in that respect.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think, like you said, those emotions are something that I think a lot of pet owners sort of overlook. We just assume that, our dogs are wagging their tails and they're happy to see us when we get home. And so they must be, just kind of a happy, well-adjusted animal overall. And it's not unless something's really seriously wrong, like maybe your dog's very ill, and you notice, it's noticeably different in behavior, like not feeling well and kind of being lethargic and laying around, where they sort of think about emotions. But when you're working with your dog together as a team, training or maybe doing a sport, or there's many things that owners do with their pets, there's emotions to think about there as well. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Absolutely. So here's a really good example that I hear all the time. So, for instance, if you have a dog who is maybe reactive to other animals or people when they're outside walking, one of the common things, and this tends to be a human default, sit. We tell our dogs to sit. So what I start to do is I say to the human, your dog is sitting. So do you feel that the dog has achieved what it is that you'd like them to do? And they say yes. And I say, okay, so the behavior of sitting is there. What's happening emotionally right now? Let's look at your dog. What do they look like? How are they feeling? So you might get this sit, but the pupils are dilated, the ears are back, there's tightness in the muscles, there's creases around the corners of the mouth. Sometimes there's a trembling in the body. There's so much tension in there. And so essentially what we would say is, I don't really care if the dog sits or lies down or stands on their head. Is the dog calm? So instead of looking at it, you need to sit to say hello to another dog, or you need to sit when another dog is there, What we actually want to teach them is we need you to be calm when another dog is there. So whether they want the other dog to go away or come closer, the behavior that we actually want is calm, right?
Right.
So we actually want the emotion of calmness. And that might look different in different dogs. But when you have a really well-trained dog and you tell them to sit, the human starts to think, I've got the behavior. I've got the dog sitting. Now they can go and say hello, or now we can move past. But what's happening internally is more important. So that's where we start to look at it. Oftentimes when I'm working with clients, if they take your obedience cues and throw them out the window for right now, it's not necessary. I do not care if the dog is on 5 legs, 4 legs, 2 legs, 1 leg, or elevated in the air, if that's what makes them calm, you know. And typically there are the behaviors that go along with that. So we can start to see that usually if the dog is calm, they will have slow, soft muscles. So that tends to mean sitting or lying down in a relaxed position. So each dog looks a little different. When they're relaxed, the tail carriage will be different. When it's relaxed on one dog than on another dog, and ear carriage and so on and so forth. So we get people to start to examine, what does my dog look like when he's calm and thinking?
I think it's really important that you stress that. I think as owners, one of the best things that we can do is simply to just observe your dog, and whether you get them from a puppy and you're watching them kind of grow and become the dog that they're going to be, or whether you adopt a rescue that's already 3 or 4 years old, just taking the time to observe and noting what is typical, normal behavior for my dog, and what does he look like when he's upset? What does he look like when he's scared? What does he look like when he's happy? Like you said, that's different in every dog. And I think that that's not something that a lot of owners expect, especially new owners who kind of have that generalization of, all dogs sort of act the same, which is very untrue. That's an important part of being a dog owner, is just observing, spending some time with your dog, getting to know their norms as far as behavior goes.
And this is a perfect example of when I talked about earlier how I didn't want to make dogs mechanical. I knew a little bit about training at that time, and I knew that most of the jobs that trainers did were to make the dog heel and sit and go and come and wait and all of these things, right? And for me, it didn't really matter about if they were an inch beside me or behind me or in front of me. It didn't really matter where the dog was placed. What mattered to me was that my dog is relaxed and is following my body, and that the leash is loose, and that we're not fighting or struggling, and that they're looking to me for direction. So when I started to think about that, that's how the idea of working in the behavior realm came to me. And really, the easiest way to describe it is I'm sort of a translator. Essentially, I look at the dog, I help to the owners to understand what it is that the dog is communicating to them. And then I take what it is the owners want to communicate to their dogs, and I give them a way in which they can do that. So even something as simple as body shakes. So a body shake where the dog, and I'm not talking about a tremble, I'm talking about a full shake, 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 right? When the dog shakes their whole body up, that's an indication that they're taking tension out of the body. This is a rewardable behavior. This is a behavior that we want to encourage, right? And people don't think about that. On the other side, dogs are with the scratching and sneezing. People think all the time my dog has allergies. I cannot tell you how many times I've gone to someone's house and say, "Oh, he's just got allergies. He always does that." And I have to explain to them, no, that's actually adrenaline. When the skin feels itchy, the blood comes to the surface, and you get this scratching behavior. Sometimes looks like they're gnawing on a piece of corn cob. And then you get sneezing because it tickles the sinuses. These are all indications of adrenaline. Those are not behaviors you want to reward. So you don't want to say, "Oh, good, you're all worked up. Now you can go play with your friends," right? Or, "Good, you're all worked up. Now it's time for us to have a play." That's not the kind of behavior that you want to reward. You want to reward when they're stretching their body out and they're calming their muscles down. They're taking tension out of their body. Those are the behaviors you want to reward.
Oh, very interesting. That's a great analogy that you use, that your job is more of a translator. And I think that's a great way to explain behavior, and because you're a behaviorist and not necessarily a trainer all the time, sometimes you're that translator, and then, it's kind of you're that piece first, and then you can start working on the training, once you figure out what's actually going on. So that's a really great way to put it, I think, so that the rest of us can understand it.
Yeah, and it's a really good exercise for the listeners. Really think about what you want your dog to do in a specific situation. So think of a situation where your dog behaves in a way that you don't like, and kind of think to yourself, well, what would I like him to do? And most of the time when I ask that question, they say, well, I want him to sit, or I want him to lie down. But that's actually not what you want them to do. What you want them to do is to be comfortable in that scenario, or to disengage from that object, or to pay attention. So really what you have to think about is not exactly like what position you want him in, or what behavior do you want him engaging in. How do you want him to feel about this? And then what sort of things can you do to promote that? So it's really a different way of looking at it.
Yeah, that is a different way of looking at it. I think it's an approach that most pet owners don't take. So I'm glad that you're pointing that out. So let's say that we're at that point. You've thought it through. You know what you want your dog to do. You figured out kind of that behavior aspect of it, and now you're moving forward onto the training. I get a lot of questions from listeners who are wondering about the products that they're using, because when you go to the pet store and there's this little training aisle filled with all the stuff that you might need to train your dog, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different products out there. So for listeners who are simply like listening on iTunes, on our website, I've given just a brief little background about you and your companies. And one of the things that you've done is created some really great training aids for pet parents to use. So can you tell us a little bit about how those came about? Because I understand that you were looking for something that you couldn't find on the market.
You've got it. And my goodness, I have been on that side of it. I have tried everything on the market. So I do have my favorites, absolutely. But the process of trying to determine what you should use and what you shouldn't use is a tough one. Here are a few things that you can think about and questions that you need to ask when you're looking at products that are going to be used by your dog or help you to handle your dog. You really want to start to look at comfort. You want to make sure that this is something that is comfortable for your dog to use, to wear, because if it's not, you're going to engage in this whole other process of now we're struggling to get something on the dog that he really doesn't like. And then again, going back to this behavior thing, if you're trying to use that tool to have a good interaction, and every time you use that tool, it's uncomfortable, you've actually started to make the emotional state different than you would like it to be in that situation. So that's one thing. Safety, of course, is another thing to look at. Is this tool helping you promote safety for your dog and for the people who are around your dog, so public safety? The next thing that you want to look at is quality. So when you're spending your money, obviously, it's easy to just choose based on price point, right? So it's easy to just go to a wall and kind of say, that's the cheapest one, I'm going to take that. But typically, and not all the time, but typically price and quality tend to go hand in hand. So you kind of want to make sure that you're looking at the quality of the product and simple things like how it's going to feel. And again, going back to comfort on your dog and that kind of thing. Even with toys, you want to look at how long is this going to last? Is it going to have pieces that are going to come apart? Is my dog going to swallow this? Is it going to be a giant mess? And now we're going to be in a confrontation where I'm trying to take it away from him or clean stuff up as he's tearing it apart. You don't want to buy the products that are going to actually create issues for you. That's not the idea. So those are some things to look at for sure. The last and, in my opinion, the most important part of this is, especially if it's a handling tool, what is it telling your dog? What information, what feedback is this giving your animal? And this is part of the reason why the Jaywalker, my company, the Jaywalker, and the Jaywalker harness was born, because I was having a really difficult time trying to find products to recommend to my clients. Because, you need to be able to have tools that are going to help you to translate the information that you want to the dog and help the dog to translate information back to you. And you don't want to add in any unnecessary stuff in there that's going to create emotional baggage. So what we were looking at was a tool that was going to, A, again, be comfortable, B, have high quality, C, safety, and D, function. So we wanted it to be able to communicate properly. And one of the biggest problems when we're walking, as everybody knows, is that disengagement. You're walking along, and it happens for the humans too. And this was another thing that we came up with, was the utility belt, because not only does the dog disengage, but we tend to, as the handlers, disengage from our dogs, right? Whether it's we're on our phones or we're just enjoying the view, we forget that we're supposed to be walking together. So we really wanted to create a product that was going to promote that engagement of the handler and the dog. So what we did with the Jaywalker was we researched, first of all, how the body works on a dog. And we wanted to make sure that we were creating a product, again, in that safety realm that wasn't going to cause problems on the trachea or problems on the shoulder tendons. So we found the perfect spot where we could fit across the chest, which is really where a collarbone would be on a dog. So it's higher up, about an inch below where a collar would sit, and high enough that it's not going to restrict movement. The idea here, again, with comfort, is not to restrict movement. We're not trying to keep them from moving. We're trying to show them how to move and where to move. So we raised up on the top. We made sure that the chest strap was nice and high. We used really soft tubular webbing that was going to be able to mold with the body, like wearing a good pair of shoes that your feet get comfortable in and shape to your body. And then we put these attachments on either side. So a human can choose, I want to walk on the left or the right, and they can clip the dog on the side they want to walk on. And this really amazing thing happened when we started prototyping was when the dog would pull forward, it would turn back towards the owner. So all the owner had to do was either stop or take a step back, and the dog would re-engage with them. And we went, holy cow, this is really working, because now the dog goes, I really want that. Well, when I pull to go there, I turn back around and look at my owner, and that gives an owner the opportunity to say, I like that. In dog behavior and training, you have 1 to 2 seconds to reward or punish behavior. So in this instant, what's happening is they go this way, they come back. Now you get this bingo moment where they're re-engaged with you. So whether you want to use treats, which is what I would recommend if you have a dog who's very environmental focused, you can reward with a food reward. Or even just by moving forward again after the dog's re-engaged with you, you've now rewarded them by giving access to the environment. So either way, you're now rewarding the turning around and re-engaging as opposed to trying to punish the pulling. So we sort of flipped it around, both figuratively and literally, right? So that now it's changed the way that you're walking with your dog. It also gives you a lot of control. If you try to go pull through the strength of your dog's body, you're going to give them more power, and in fact, it will actually promote pulling further ahead, because they're going to say, when I feel resistance, I've got to pull through that. If you go to the side, you're offsetting that momentum, and you're turning it back towards you. So you're not going to be in this situation where you have to struggle. Oh. So the next part of it was attaching that dog to the human. The human felt connected, and that's where the utility belt came in. So we put this utility belt on the human, and hands-free walking wasn't something new, but we had felt that hands-free walking belts hadn't completely covered all of the bases. So we created this really awesome hands-free belt that did a number of different things that I'll explain. But basically what we're doing now is we're actually saying to the human, use your body. If you're pulling back with your arms, our arms are so confusing to a dog. They don't have limbs that move like that, so I call them monkey arms. So we move our limbs around like crazy. And you're telling your dog, move this way, move that way, go up, go down, fly, elevate onto your back legs. We're doing all of this really weird stuff that's so confusing to the dog that eventually they just learn to ignore it. So by actually putting a belt on the human's core and telling them to use their bodies, we've changed the way that humans are leading their dogs. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about the 3 different things that the utility belt does.
Yeah, absolutely.
We call it the 3-in-1 tool. So it has a little clip at the base of the utility belt that you can unclip and actually leave that part on your dog when you're at the park or letting them have free access. So that makes it super simple to just grab your dog and reconnect to your belt without having to fiddle around with the clips that are at the end of the leash. So that was one thing that we added in. The next thing we added in was a quick release from your belt, because of course there are going to be times, and hopefully most people don't encounter them, but there are going to be times where you get into trouble and you really just need to quickly release from your dog. If you compress both sides, it will disconnect.
Oh, that's a fantastic safety feature.
It's a safety feature. You got it. That's exactly what it's meant
Absolutely.
to do. And it also allows you to disconnect and hand your leash over to someone. So without having to take off your belt, you could quickly disconnect and hand your leash.
Oh, yeah.
So you don't have to disconnect just when you're in trouble. If you wanted to, and I do it all the time with my husband here, can you hold him? I just disconnect, hand the leash over to my husband so that I can go and tend to one of our children. So this allows us to quickly switch over without having to take the whole belt system off. It also comes with seatbelt tether. So another thing that I was hearing from clients feedback all the time was the car stuff. And I actually had a client whose dog, unfortunately, when she opened the door to get the groceries, saw a squirrel, bolted, and was hit by a car. It was really traumatic.
Aww.
And I'm sure that that's not the first time that has happened.
Absolutely, unfortunately.
So we put the seatbelt tether in. So you can unclip from your belt and just plug into your seatbelt tether. And now your dog is tethered. He's not going to jump out the window or out the door when you're getting your groceries out of the car, and he's not going to hop back and forth from the front seat to the back seat. So that comes with it as well. And then the last thing that we added in was this ability to take off your belt and connect it to the leash and have a long line. And long lines are amazing for working behavior and for training. And anyone who works in the training world will definitely agree that long lines are essential. So it gives you the ability to quickly transition into having a long line.
Wow, that's amazing. And of course, I checked out your website, which for anybody that's listening that wants some more information, those are right underneath the podcast if they're listening on YouTube or social media or anything like that, and available on our site as well. They can just click and check that out because you have multiple websites. But, of course, I checked out the products before I spoke with you. And that was the first thing that I noticed that kind of stood out to me. Like you said, the hands-free walking isn't a new thing, but the versatility that you offer is definitely something that others don't.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we really worked hard to listen to people, to take their feedback, and to create products that were really going to help them. And again, everything that we're developing is designed to make the communication between the owner and the dog easier and simpler. We want to make moving with your dog throughout your life and your community and your neighborhood an easier exercise. So these are all the things that we took into consideration in designing the product. And again, this was not something that I ventured into on purpose. It was quite accidental, actually.
That seems to be the way it happens.
Yeah, I know, right? We didn't mean to create a product line, and now, I had to learn, how to work a sewing machine so that I could give feedback to my staff when I had never even owned an iron in my entire adult life. So it was an interesting process, but it's been quite an adventure, and really it's a product that we're really proud of because it's something that was missing and necessary.
And the thing that I like too is that, you knew going into this, so you had worked with dogs before on the behavior and the training level. You knew that, as a pet owner, you walk into a pet store, it's extremely overwhelming, especially for a new pet owner. But I think training is something that's unique in the pet industry, as opposed to, like, say, grooming products. If you, you have a dog and you need certain grooming products for your dog, and those are pretty good, for the life of your dog. You're, unless he gets some kind of a skin condition or something, you're pretty good using the same type of brush, the same type of shampoo, whatever. But with training, it changes in the stages of your dog's life, and it also changes in what you do. If you decide, maybe for example, somebody retires from work and they have a dog that, for years they've just done kind of basic obedience work, and now all of a sudden they're retired, they want something more. Maybe they start doing agility or competing in something like that. So it's definitely something that some certain things you're going to need a leash no matter what age that your dog is. But some of those training tools might change, and you're going to be buying new things all the time throughout your dog's life. So it's not something that it's like, you figure out once and you've got it and you're good. It's a very overwhelming thing for pet owners. So the fact that you knew that, you understood that, you knew the things that you should be looking for, comfort, safety, that kind of stuff. And of course, also you kept in mind, we're all on a budget. You need something that's affordable. Price is something that a lot of pet owners look at first. So, to keep products affordable but also make them high quality, I think is important too for the rest of us as consumers, especially.
Absolutely. And again, going back to this idea of versatility, we've been a lot of the people who sell our products, we're telling them, you do not need to sell this product just to a dog who pulls. It's an excellent tool for communicating for any dog, whether they pull or they don't pull. It makes the whole process much easier. And people, we're finding more and more are using it for jogging, for cycling. They're using it for agility. They're using it for swimming. So we're seeing that the product versatility is really coming out in the different ways that it can be used and the different life stages. So we also put together a product that had, first of all, we have a large size range, but on top of that, we also have these what we call extenders. So essentially, if the product, all dogs are not equal, right? So if the product is not fitting your dog in the way that it should, you can use an extender to increase the girth. You might have a really small chest, but a really big girth. So you're going to need that small medium size across the chest where the actual function components are, but then you need to get over a big rib cage. So you can actually get an extender that will make your product exactly the right fit for your dog. So we've tried to create different things that'll make it more versatile for them, and we're trying to create a line. Everything works together well. So we're creating a line that is almost like a build your own. What is it that you need? What problems are you trying to solve? How do you need to use this tool? And then putting together a package for them or a system that's going to help them engage in the different activities that they want to engage in.
Yeah, you're talking to somebody that totally understands that. I've had boxers for many, many years before I was married. My first dog, when I was like out on my own, was a boxer, and I had boxers for many years. My husband loves boxers as well, so we've had boxers together too. And the build of a boxer is very unique. They have that deep, broad chest, and where the rest of them is sort of petite. They have a more petite waist, and their neck is not a big, wide neck. So we've had issues in the past finding products, harnesses specifically, and clothes too, that would fit our dogs properly because they are proportion different than other breeds. And boxers aren't the only one, but that's the one that I know that I've personally had experience with. So it's really nice for me to look at something and not have to say, our dog's kind of right in between the medium and the large. If I get the large, it might be a little too big. If I get the medium, it might be a little too small. What do we do? Should we look for another brand? We've done that with a lot of different products. We've kind of played that game. So to look at a product and think, you know what, we can get this and we can add the extender because her chest is a lot deeper than, what we expected or whatever the case may be. That's something that I find worth the money for us. It's not that guessing game. We've tried harnesses before that were tight in the chest and then, too loose on the neck. So it's not comfortable for her. It makes me nervous thinking that they're going to wiggle out of it if you set it, so that it's tighter on the neck, then, the chest is looser or whatever. And you just worry that without the proper fit, it's really nerve wracking for a pet owner thinking, either it's going to hurt them or they're going to be able to get out of it. So I love that as well. That's a great point that you made about the versatility.
One thing that is really lacking that we came across as well with products And again, you're talking about someone going into a store and looking at this giant wall of stuff and going, what do I choose? So one thing that we found incredibly lacking is support. We really want to provide support to people. I mean, that is our primary business. We started behavior consulting. So we want to provide support to people, and the products complement that really. And what happens when a user buys one of our products is we are really, really invested in their success. So that's something that is novel, I think, in this realm. And if
Absolutely.
you can find products that have support behind them, you're in a good position. I know I've heard on a number of occasions, I'm available through Facebook Messenger. I mean, we have 2 different Facebook groups going for users, and we're available by phone and by email, and sometimes I even get calls. And I will talk with somebody. So if they're having a difficult time using the product or fitting the product, we want to make sure that it's successful for everyone involved, because ultimately, at the end of the day, it's really not about a product. It's about a result, and it's about solving a problem. And I think that's the thing that a lot of the time is missing from vendors who are selling products or manufacturers, is that they don't realize that the product is really not what they were looking for. They were looking for a solution. So it's something to keep in mind. Does the product solve the problem?
Absolutely. And I appreciate you mentioning that, because that is something I think that's overwhelming to a lot of pet owners, is they maybe necessarily don't know what product to choose, and the associate at your pet store can pretty much help you with that. They are informed on the products, what they do, what type of behavior or dog that they're going to work best for. So you can find that answer, or maybe even with just a little bit of research online. But having that support, I think one thing that always sticks out to me, one of the most frequent things that I hear, is that pet parents work for a little while and they begin to get really frustrated and overwhelmed with training, especially if you have a new puppy or you have a rescue that maybe has some behavior issues that you need to work through. It's not something that happens overnight. It's not even something that happens over a few nights. It's something that takes weeks and weeks of work, and you need to be consistent with it. And I think sometimes pet parents just need to hear that you're not necessarily doing anything wrong. Maybe, you need a different product, but for the most part, you're doing everything right. What you need is a little advice and a little guidance on the training part, and you just need to stick with it. So that's really, I think, important. And it's something, like you said, with the bigger companies and the mass manufacturers that we have now, quite often you don't get that. How many times have you heard somebody say, well, I bought this, it didn't really work well, or I couldn't figure it out. I called the company and I was on hold for, a half an hour, and then I just hung up, or I sent them an email, but, it's been 2 weeks and I haven't heard back from them, or, whatever that case may be. But to have that security and knowing that, the customer service is there and the support is there just to help you use the product to the best of its abilities is really important, I think, from a consumer standpoint.
Yeah, and you touched on something there that I would love to elaborate on, which is, a lot of the time you're talking about being reassured that you're doing the right things. And sometimes what I find is that people are working way too hard than they need to work to achieve what they need to achieve. So let me explain that, because a lot of the work that people are doing to try and achieve a behavior, if they would just stop and be patient and give the dog an opportunity to think it through and execute, there's only so many choices that they can make, and eventually they will land on the right one. So I really have a rule with clients: you don't fight with your dog. And I have that rule, even with my children. Like, I have 4 kids. So I have that rule that, we try, well, of course, everybody makes mistakes from time to time, but we try not to fight. So if I find that my 13-year-old is really disengaged and not in a situation where they're listening, there is no point on continuing an argument, continuing to explain, continuing to try and teach. If they are emotionally disengaged, if the dog is shut off from you, stop talking, stop fighting. You need to try a different way. So people work really, really hard when sometimes they don't need to. Sometimes really what they need to do is to stop and to listen and to pay attention and to be patient. So those are the two messages I end up sending people all the time is, look, number one, you're not doing anything wrong. Number two, you're just working too hard. And there's my coonhound in the background piping in. But yeah, you're working too hard. You don't need to work that hard. Just give them a second, because they need to learn and they need to take the time to absorb the information. And so those are the two messages. Absolutely, you're not doing anything wrong. You're just working too hard, and nobody wants to work harder than they need to.
Yes, I absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think that's wonderful. And I love that you've taken what you know about dogs, what you know about dog owners, what you know about, having pets of your own and your own firsthand experience. And you've created this line. And I hope to see more products come, in the future too, that are based on those same kind of principles. So I'm excited to follow you. I hope that we've gotten our listeners excited about it too. And I am positive that there are people listening who are training a dog or going to be training a dog or still working with a dog that they've been training for a while. The other thing that I want to mention too is that if anybody has any questions, they can pass those along to me, and I would be happy to talk to you and get any follow-ups answered or anything like that. If anybody's listening right now and thinking, oh my gosh, this is me and my dog, and we've been having these problems, and maybe, I'm not doing anything wrong, send them an email, and, we'd be happy to respond to that.
Absolutely. And we are available to do phone consultations for people who want, a little bit of an assessment or to help them get on the right track. In our region, in our greater Ottawa area, we do home consultations.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So, and definitely any product support is included in your product. So we make sure to help people who have decided to take that step and change the way that they're moving and living with their dog with some of our products. We definitely like to help, and we're available. Human emotion wrapped up in our dogs. And so I want to tell people that your dog's behavior, how your dog behaves, does not actually represent whether or not you are a good dog owner. It's how you respond to that dog's behavior that actually determines how good of an owner you are. So there's no need to be embarrassed. There's no need to feel guilty. How you respond to your dog's behavior is what determines if you are a good dog owner.
Fantastic advice from Jessica O'Neill. I want to thank her again for being on the podcast. Some really great information and absolutely an empowering message for dog owners. Quite often, being a dog owner is much like being a parent. We call them our fur children, our fur babies for a reason. It's very, very similar. It's easy to feel embarrassed, frustrated, to feel like you're not doing it right. But in the end, every dog's different. Every dog owner is different. We all have our own ways of doing things. If you feel like you need help training your dog, reach out. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. Jump online, go to your local library, go to your local pet store. There's some great, excellent resources out there. Seek the help of a professional dog trainer, absolutely. And, it might not be an issue with you or your pet. It might be an issue with the way that the two of you communicate. So, working with a professional trainer, canine behaviorist, might be all it takes, maybe 1 or 2 sessions, just to get you guys on the same page and moving forward. So, don't be embarrassed. Don't feel bad if training is just not going the way that you thought it would. I've had many, many dogs in my life. I don't think training a dog has ever gone the way that I thought it would. Sometimes it's easier. Sometimes it's more difficult. Sometimes it's an outright challenge, even for somebody that's very experienced with canines. If you don't have, if you haven't had dogs in the past, you're a first-time dog owner, it's bound to be something that's going to test your patience. Stay consistent, stay strong, keep up with that training every day, all day long. The consistency is really key. And look for those products. There are some great products out on the market that can help you with whatever the issues might be. If you're just trying to do some command training, or if you have a dog that doesn't behave on a leash, if you have a jumper or a dog that is destructive, there's so many different issues with dogs that parents can face. And there's so many products out there for us to try. And you know what? Maybe Jessica is going to be an inspiration to us. And if we can't find the products that we need, maybe we need to create them. So maybe you're listening and you're thinking to yourself, my goodness, this is my problem. I'm having this issue with my dog. I can't find a product to help me. I know what I need. I know what I'm looking for, but it's just not out there. Maybe this is your call to action, and it's time for you to go out there and create what you want and market it for other pet owners. Who knows? Either way, if you guys have questions about getting a product out there or about dog training in general, again, jump on our website, theoryofpets.com. There's a section there to leave your comments and your questions. I'd be happy to answer those for you. Pass them along to Jessica if it's something that I can't answer myself. So thanks a lot for listening, guys, and I will be back with another podcast very soon.